May I ask you to take your seats because we are about to start. Don't know if there are still people outside, otherwise the doors can be closed. Okay, let's just get started. Yeah, well, what a lot of people. We're sold out. It, it attracts a lot of people if you put a 4 gigawatt tender on the market, it seems. Well, welcome here in Amsterdam. Welcome also the people who are watching the live stream. My name is Ruud de Bruyne and I'm your moderator this afternoon. Let me start with this. About 5 years ago, we had a kind of tipping point in the Netherlands. And suddenly, offshore wind energy came in a very rapid acceleration. But already in 2007, I had a kind of personal milestone. Our then Crown Prince Willem-Alexander did the official opening of the offshore wind farm Egmond aan Zee. And I can tell you that I was quite involved in that project, did the feasibility study for it, etc. So I was very proud sitting there and our Crown Prince did the opening. This year, in 2022, now King Willem-Alexander made a trip together with TenneT. And I'm going to show you just a short impression of that trip. If you watch that video carefully, you will see not only the king, but also a lot of other people. And all those people are very proud. Yeah, let's get started. Let's have a look at the trip of our king to the current offshore wind energy project. You can start the video now. So, what do we have for you today? We have a program in 3 parts. The first part, we dive into the period beyond 2030. In the second part, there will be a panel discussion about all those ambitious plans and how what that has for effect on the supply chain. And in block 3, we go to the daily reality, and that is a session about the largest tender ever done in the Netherlands, the 4 gigawatt IJmuidenver tender. But before we start, in the offshore, we always care about the safety. So if something happens and we have to leave the rooms, there is not only an exit over there where you came in, but there's also an exit over there, and the people from the RAI will guide you to the master point. I'm not alone today. Angela Marlet is sitting here, and she keeps a look at the chat. So if people from who are watching the live stream have questions, you are my connection. You can also raise questions, start discussions. You don't have to introduce yourself unless you are from the press. Then we think it's quite polite that you make yourself known as press. I don't know if there is any press in the room here, but we will see that. By the way, maybe it's a good idea just to get a bit of impression of what all these people in the room are here. Can you raise your hand if you are a developer? Wow. I think we're going to have a lot of work in this IJmuidenver tender. Government officials and agencies, it's very less. The supply chain. Also. And legal, are there legal people? Oh, no, only two. That's good. That's a very good indication. Because if there are a lot of legal, then something is wrong. Before we start with the program, I'm going to ask Eva de Lede. Eva is the team lead at the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy. Next year, it's going to be a special year for you and your team because there is this North Seas energy cooperation and the Netherlands has the presidency next year. So quite obvious questions are then, what is this cooperation and what do you want to achieve during the presidency?
Thank you. Yes, so just to get an idea, who is familiar with the North Seas Energy Cooperation? Raise your hand. It's a bit over half of the room, so that's it's very good. So what the North Seas Energy Cooperation is, just to start with it, it's seas, so multiple. It's not only the North Sea as we know it, but also the Irish Sea, so Ireland is involved as well. And what the NSEC, as we call it, does is that it supports and facilitates the development of renewables, production offshore, as well as grid in the North Seas region. There are currently 9 members, which are named at the screen, but I can also mention them. So it's the Benelux, Denmark, France, Germany, Ireland, Luxembourg, Norway, Sweden, and the European Commission is involved as well as a supporting framework. The UK used to be involved, and if we are lucky, at the end of December, there will be a memorandum of understanding signed, so we can work again with the UK. They won't become a member again, but we will be able to take them on board for some discussions at technical level. So that's very good. So the NSEC has 4 working streams. The first is hybrid and joint projects, which is really about infrastructure. The second is the maritime spatial planning with important role for ecology. The third is the support framework and finance, so that's about tenders. And the fourth is delivering 2050. That's a really long-term vision where we will touch upon a bit later as well. And the Dutch presidency will have 3 specific pillars as our priorities stated. The first is the North Seas system vision for 2050. So that relates a little bit to the 4th pillar already, but it also relates to what we're doing nationally, which Mark and Joost will tell you a bit more later. The second is the transitions on the North Sea. As you are well aware, we as offshore wind, we're not the only ones at the North Sea, but there's also fishery involved and other forms of food production. There's of course nature with all its challenges and all the different movements that are also at sea. So we have to take them all into account and work with each other to balance everyone's interest. And the third is the sustainable supply chain. That means that we are looking into responsible business conduct and also circularity. So those elements are involved, but there's also the certainty that we will be able to deliver for 2030 with all these different ambitions in the different countries. So those are the pillars of our presidency. If you have certain ideas about it, contact me or my colleague Emily, who will be chairing the presidency next year. Thanks.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you very much. And you may give her a hand, of course. Then we start with the first part of the program. We have 2 speakers from the ministry talking about the period beyond 2030. Mark Stuurman, who will present kind of outlook, and Joost Vermeulen, who is going to tell us about a North Sea infrastructure plan. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ruud, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Stuurman. I'll be sharing a little bit on our policy development for the long term. So later afternoon, we will have some interesting discussions on the shorter term, that is up until 2030. But we're working hard already also for the longer term, so that's beyond 2030 in our offshore wind policies. Earlier this fall, in September, our minister published the first real outlook or vision on what we think or what he thinks offshore wind, the role of offshore wind will be beyond 2030 up until 2050. And today we'll be sharing very briefly in the few minutes that we have what is the outline of the main policies that we're working on for this long term. So next slide, Angela, thanks. So maybe first of all the question, why do we need an outlook for 2050 at all on the North Sea? Up until now we've always had a roadmap for offshore wind, looking ahead approximately 10 years, having a clear schedule of rollout, and that worked tremendously well, as you all know. But we've seen that offshore wind is growing, and it's quickly becoming the largest energy source we have in the Netherlands. And that means that the decisions and the choices we make for offshore wind, they really impact the entire energy system, and also, of course, all other stakeholders on the North Sea. And this means that we need to make sure that we can make all the decisions we need to make in time, and also that we can do it with an integral vision of what the energy system needs for the long term. So we want to make sure that the steps we take right now fit in the long-term planning for the energy system. And why are we working on a vision for 2050 already now, in 2022? That is because for offshore wind, 2030 is really yesterday. 2035 is tomorrow, and 2040 or even 50 can be tomorrow with the lead times we have for our projects. So earlier this year, the cabinet raised the goal for 2030 to 21 gigawatts, and that's, we think, the maximum that can be done. Although maybe our panel just now will debate that if it's even possible, but that's the maximum we can do. But offshore wind will grow significantly more after 2030. So what do we envision to do? First of all, we want to take the step from scenarios that we have for the long term towards a plan. So this is part of a bigger scheme within the energy system. The government is working on a energy system plan for the entire energy system, and we also want to do this for the North Sea. That means that we want to set targets, clear targets, so not broad bandwidths, but clear targets for 2035, 2040, and 2050. And with these targets, we want to make sure that we can realize the high scenarios if need. So that's why we're now currently preparing for 50 gigawatts in 2040 and 70 gigawatts in 2050. But setting these targets, they're not set in stone like the roadmap we have now. The targets are really clear, and we want to realize these targets for 2030. These longer term targets, we have to be adaptive. We have to be able to account for changes in technology or what's possible on the North Sea and chase these targets if need be, but it needs they give guidance for now in shaping our policies. The second big change is that we foresee for this long-term development of offshore wind that we go further offshore to larger wind areas. We also see new technologies developing, like offshore hydrogen, maybe even offshore solar. And that means that we think that for these larger, further away offshore wind areas, we're moving towards large-scale energy hubs. And we need to switch our approach from side-by-side development to big-scale hub development. Yeah, and later Joost, my colleague, he will tell a little bit more on our policy development for these big hubs and the development of the North Sea Energy Infrastructure Plan. This infrastructure plan will not replace our current roadmap. Our current roadmap is a very strong instrument we have in the Netherlands. It works really well, and we're keeping that for the future. So the development of wind sites, part of Energy Hub or not, will still land in our roadmap, and we will continue to add projects to our roadmap towards 2035 and 2040. Next slide. Just a quick overview of the policies we're working on to make sure we're in time for this development of offshore wind beyond 2030. So what we're going to do will be based in the National Energy System Plan, where we set the targets for offshore wind. And we also want to give guidance how much of that we think will be electrical and and how much of it will be hydrogen. We're going to work on where it should come on the North Sea. In the partial review of the North Sea program, we're going to work on assigning new areas for offshore wind for this next phase beyond 2030. We're going to develop a plan on how it should be realized in the North Sea Energy Infrastructure Plan, which Joost will discuss in a minute. And we're going to start a new investigation on how to landfall all this energy in the program investigation landfall options offshore wind energy, which is a mouthful. And we foresee we also need new policies a new policy framework to enable this growth of these energy hubs. We see new technologies like offshore hydrogen, and we want to make sure the policy framework is in place in time, and we want to make sure that the technologies are there in time. So we're investing in research, innovation, the first offshore hydrogen demos before 2030, and we also want to make sure in the coming years that our policy frameworks and legal framework is updated so it can accommodate these large-scale energy hubs. Of course, we cannot do this alone, so we're used as Offshore Wind to work together with stakeholders, and we'll continue to do so in all these tracks. We'll involve the relevant stakeholders, because offshore wind has been a success in the Netherlands because of the close collaboration between all the stakeholders, government, market, and TSOs. So that will be the base for the future as well. So I'll leave it at that and give the floor to Joost for a more detailed overview of the North Sea Energy Infrastructure Plan.
Thanks, Mark. My name is Joost Vermeulen. I work in the offshore wind energy team in the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy. My responsibility is to coordinate all the spatial planning issues and also the policies for the offshore grid. As Mark told us, our minister set out his plans for, or his vision for, the rollout of offshore wind energy beyond 2030. And one of the first things that we need to be working on is infrastructure. We know from experience that planning and also permitting offshore infrastructure takes the longest time, longer than building offshore wind farms. So it's time to set the wheels in motion now, and that's what we are going to do next year with the North Sea Energy Infrastructure Plan. I'll give you a few highlights of what this plan should entail. Mark already told you that, or it was on his slide at least, that in 1 year's time, so if we see each other next year, we hope that we will have a first version of this offshore infrastructure plan. And by next summer, we'll have a first draft. I'll come back to that later. But the goal of this plan is to really map out the infrastructure that is needed to land for, in the first place, all the offshore energy. But not only landing that to our own shore, but also to be able to transport that to other countries. And possibly also other offshore energy hubs built by other countries. This infrastructure plan is part of a larger scheme, so to say, for the entire North Sea, where all the different countries are connected to each other. So in building this plan, we are also in close contact with neighboring countries in order to make it a useful plan that is part of a much larger useful scheme. This plan should also give direction for government, but also market parties, and also TSO. What kinds of roles do they have in this plan, and what are we expecting from them? It will also give an indication, or more than an indication, where and when we foresee to build offshore energy hubs. And I would say a real large component of this offshore infrastructure plan will be pinpointing where and how we are going to give shape to these offshore energy hubs. And this is also closely connected to the process that we are also starting next year together with the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management in designating new offshore wind farm zones that will be ready for building offshore wind farms in the period between 2030 and 2040. What we're also going to look at is our current natural gas infrastructure on the North Sea. Currently there are about 150 gas producing platforms. They're all connected with pipes, and those bring all the produced natural gas to shore. And what parts of that infrastructure can we reuse for a future hydrogen network at sea? And what kind of also roles should, for example, Gasunie as our onshore TSO have also offshore? And what role should there be for market parties as well? So those are the basic aims of this plan. So it contains a strategic vision of what kind of infrastructure we are going to build for the next years, and also what infrastructure should we start with and what comes next after that. And it should have provide a proof of concept of offshore energy hubs. It should also give in broad lines, although it's very difficult for us at this point to point that out, and I think you will all agree with me, to what extent the future energy will be brought to shore in the shape of electricity, and to what extent it will be molecules, for example hydrogen. We don't know that. We all have a feel it's going to happen, but how quickly and after which, how long it will take before we really see offshore hydrogen production at scale, we don't know yet. So this plan should also provide flexibility. And in the end, we would like to draw a map, and on this slide you see a first impression of what it could look like. But this is not to be this is not going to be a blueprint, as we don't know what the future entails for exactly. But the first solid lines, connections should appear on this map, and then future connections well, can be drawn in by pencil and can also be added afterwards, and also possibly adapted. So this plan should also be flexible towards the future and adaptive, which means that we are going to update it well, every now and then when we feel there's need to do that. What we're not going to do in this plan is designate new offshore wind farms. That's a different a project that's going to run next year. And also a different program that we have is a program called VAWELS, the program VAWELS, which looks at the specific landing routes, cable routes from these offshore wind farms or these offshore energy hubs towards shore. Those exact routes, they will be well, thought out in a different program, but we are going to focus on specifically which international connections do we really need. Next slide, please, Angela. Concerning the process of developing this plan, we've given ourselves a year for a first version, which is quite ambitious. However, during this year, we've already done some homework together also with TSOs, with TenneT, with Gasunie, for example. So we have a lot of knowledge. We're going to wrap that up by the end of this year. And that will be the basis on which we will start. And we foresee that more or less by the end of January, maybe early February, you will hear from us again with our first thoughts of this infrastructure plan. And we foresee to make this plan, to build it together with you. And so we will organize also specific stakeholder meetings. We're now in the process of figuring out how we are going to design all this, but it's going to be an interactive process where you all have a role and you can all give your ideas and your worries and also the opportunities that you see. We foresee a special role for the TSOs and also for EBN, which is the state-owned company that participates in the current offshore energy, particularly oil and natural gas. And we asked them to give us advice on how to reuse offshore natural gas infrastructure and which part would be most suitable for that. And TenneT and GasUnie, TenneT as already the offshore TSO, GasUnie as probably the offshore TSO for the offshore hydrogen network. So they have a special role as our advisors, but at the same time, there's also in this room lots of parties that have all kinds of thoughts and probably already initiatives or things like that, and would like to have a say in this as well. So once again, you will all be invited to do that, and we will provide early next year clarity on how exactly this process is going to look like. You'll see a very rough first timeline in this slide. As I said, at this point we are still wrapping up our first exploration of offshore energy hubs and also the future energy system that we foresee, and what kind of conditions that brings with it. And we propose to start next year with a webinar based upon our findings of this year, and that will be the starting point also for you to hopefully come to us with your input. By summer, we would like to have a first draft, a first concept of this infrastructure plan. In between, probably a large scale or maybe several stakeholder meetings. And by the end of next year, we hope to conclude the first draft. And also, the end of next year will, for example, if it's up to us, be the moment where there will be a political decision whether if we're going to build offshore energy hubs, whether we are going to build artificial islands or not. That is a special decision that needs to be made, because if we're going to build islands, that takes a lot of time, also brings with it a lot of unknowns yet, for example, on the ecological issues. And so we would like to have, at the latest, by the end of next year, clarity on whether we're going to pursue this island solution, or are we going to pursue other solutions, for example, platform-based, or maybe even floating, or combinations of that. So that's also one of the milestones that we foresee for next year. And that's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Yep. Are there any questions? That applause was also for Mark, of course. Are there any questions? I see one over there and in the back.
Hi there. I have a question. In the North Sea, various countries have different approaches for how they connect offshore wind to the onshore grid. For example, the UK versus the Netherlands. You mentioned that you're interested in the energy infrastructure plan creating a not just the Netherlands outlook, but for the whole North Sea. What is your approach, or how do you intend to overcome these differences when you want to create a North Sea plan? In overcoming these type of policies, because the UK, for example, is quite different than the Netherlands.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, and so how? I mean, because so you mentioned, I'm curious, how are you going to overcome when you try to create a plan where the incentives for the developer in the UK is much different than the incentives for a developer in the Netherlands?
Yeah, that's true. I don't have a clear answer yet how exactly we're going to do that and what will be the final push to draw them over the line, for example. But we've been discussing possible connections, interconnectors with the UK for a long time. we already have one through interconnector. It's called the BritNet connection, which goes from the mainland of the Netherlands to the mainland of the UK and vice versa, of course. But we've also already had discussions together with also our TSO, with TenneT, of probably building what we call a hybrid interconnector, which is an interconnector that connects offshore wind farms together, and from that also the mainlands of both countries. And so we've already made progress in that, but there are still issues, for example, also on which techniques to use, what voltage levels, things like that, but also in how things are organized in the different countries. And
Maybe if I can add?
Yeah, of course.
So this is definitely a big challenge. I think what we've seen, and this is one of the reasons, as we outlined in the letter we sent to Parliament earlier this fall, that we chose for TenneT to remain our TSO for offshore wind, is that it's much easier to get these hybrid solutions on the North Sea if it's TSOs working together. And we see a lot of countries bringing their TSO in that position. We hope others might as well. But if not, it's definitely a difficult solution. That's one of the reasons why in our NSEC chair next year, this is, as Eva lined out, the first priority to work together in getting this going. Yeah.
Okay, I see somebody there, but there was also somebody in the back, and let's do it in that order.
Mark Howard from Store Electric. You can tell the accent, and I don't recommend the British model.
Here, here.
First of all, it's focused only on megawatts. There's no focus on the ability of the grid to absorb the energy. When you using National Grid's own figures and working out from there, every new gigawatt of offshore wind connected to the grid requires 1.5 billion euros of onshore grid reinforcement just to take the grid connection, and 10% of that per annum thereafter to maintain it. And they're not thinking about putting large-scale, long-duration storage between the renewables and the grid to halve the size of grid connection. So the result of the energy transition in the Netherlands, if you do that model, is that you'll have to more than triple the size of your onshore grid, whereas if you put the storage of right scale and duration between the two, you only need to increase it by about 50%.
Can you come to a question?
The question is, are you going to look at the storage to do that? And also for your hydrogen policies, are you looking at electricity storage to take out the intermittency before the electrolyzer? Because electrolysis hates intermittency as well.
Yeah.
I think, in short, energy storage is part of this infrastructure plan. How exactly we're going to all manage that, also technically, I'm not sure yet. But that's why we ask also our TSOs to come up with suggestions for that, and also all other parties that have great ideas for this. So you're invited.
That's a short answer to a long question. There was a question in the back, and that's the last one. Because I also have a clock here ticking and have to watch that also.
Yes, hello, very
carefully.
interesting. I know this is a seminar about offshore wind, but I was actually wondering if the plans will also include CCS as one of the topics, because you're talking about the reuse of the natural gas infrastructure. Of course, CCS is a big option there as well. So I was just wondering if that will also be included in the plans.
Yeah, so CCS, at least in the Netherlands, is organized a little bit differently than offshore wind. But there's definitely, let's say, issues to be solved which relate to both. The reuse of gas pipes is, for instance, one. So we will have to use an integral weighing of benefits and pros and cons, whether it's hydrogen or CCS, if it can be used for both. Another one is the electrification of platforms, if they're going to be used for long-term CCS on the North Sea. the electrical infrastructure for offshore wind could benefit those platforms for electrification. So we're definitely looking towards those sort of synergies. But because CCS is organized much differently in the Netherlands, it's not integral part of this plan. Yeah.
Okay, we have to leave it up here. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Joost. And you may take your seats again. And you may give them an applause, of course.
Microphone.
Now, the Netherlands is not on its own with ambitious plans. We see that all over Europe. We see that globally almost every country bordering a sea or an ocean is working on offshore wind energy. Therefore, we have now a panel discussion, what that means for the supply chain. So I'm going to invite Erik Bertolet. Erik, in daily life business manager at Groningen Seaport, but here as representative of an European Port Alliance. Then Mark Heijnen. Mark Heijnen in daily life CEO of Fugro, but here as chair of the IRO, that's the Association of Dutch Suppliers in the Offshore Energy Industry. And Jan Vos, till 2017 member of the National Parliament and now chair of the Netherlands Wind Energy Association. And last but not least, Marielle Hete. And Marielle is Deputy Director Energy Transition, but then the offshore part of it, and that's the biggest part. And then I'm not done, because I'm also going to introduce to you Lotte Leufkens. Lotte is a 30-year-old mechanical engineer, an entrepreneur, because she is also founder of the company Cloud Cuddle. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And that's a Cloud Cuddle is a medical device, a bed tent for multiple handicapped persons, children, elderly. And she has won already several awards with that product. Recently, the Social Impact Award 2020 from the European Investment Bank. And you do also a little bit work for RVO because you were installed as role model in a campaign Growth Over the Borders. And that was...
yeah, that was the lead how I got here.
Yeah. We thought, well, your technical background and your role in RVO and the fact that you represent also the generation which is really important makes you the perfect moderator for this session. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, so I seem the least maritime person in this room, but my studies mechanical engineering was in the same building as maritime, so I still got quite a lot of offshore terms thrown my way, and maybe I hope that in that capacity I'll be able to lead this panel today. As Joost already just mentioned, of course, you're all invited to think along of how we're gonna, get those wind energy goals set by the Dutch government in 2030, 40, and 50. But just to keep the conversation for now in short, instead of talking with 70, 100 people sitting here, we're just going to start with the four of you. Thank you for joining. As Ruud already mentioned, we're going to talk mostly, of course, of the impact of the supply chain on these wind energy goals 2030, 40, and 50. But first, I really want to start with the upcoming goal, so the 2030 goal of 20.5 gigawatts that we should be able to achieve. And of course, the big question that I would love to get more insight in today, or at least in this panel, is, are we going to achieve that? I think Marielle is really going to nod a high yes on that.
I hope so, yeah.
I hope so. Can the other panelists also nod yes, or are we still figuring things out? I see more questionable faces. Okay, enough to talk about then. First off, of course, there are many stakeholders in this. I already talked to all of you beforehand. We have the supply chain, we have the ports, we have the infrastructure. It all passed along, of course, and also heard Mark mention, well, the 2040 and 2050 goals are adaptive, but for now the 2030 one is not. A recent study came out by New Bloomberg, New Energy Finance, that looked at that new energy goal in 2030 of 20.5 gigawatts, and they estimated that in the earliest it will be reachable by 2035. The pity with that is the fact that Bloomberg tends to be right quite often. So we hope to be one of the cases where they're not. So how are we going to achieve that? We've got quite a bit of bottlenecks to answer for that. But first I would like to ask Marielle, how do you get to such a goal of 20.5 gigawatts for starters 2030?
Yeah, how do you get there? That's a question you start with me, that's okay, but the answer would be that's something we have to do together. So as a government, we can set the goals and the target, and I guess we have to challenge ourselves and market and TSOs to get the highest goals, because the stakes are high, so we have to put them high. Last year, we doubled the gigawatts for 2030, and the question was, how much can we achieve? We set it on 21.5 gigawatts, and the day later, I guess I already received some questions, can we still get it faster even? So we feel the pressure to go faster and to go more gigawatts every day. At the same time, I think the target 21.5 gigawatts in 2030 is indeed tomorrow. So let's set this target and put everything in motion to reach that target. That's difficult enough. So for me, the biggest challenge is, I guess, getting the permits right, getting the infrastructure in time with the TSO, and all the decisions the government has to make in order to do that. So get the target in place, get it in place on the later in 2040, 2050, and help markets to reach the targets by getting the permits in time. And we get to that later, I guess, but it's difficult enough for us. So we also have our challenges together with market and TSO.
Yeah, because that's an interesting part that I would like to get in front today. Like, what are those challenges per stakeholder individually, and how can we maybe combine those challenges to speed them up instead of trying to solve them on our own? So of course we have the challenges from the government, from the Ministry of Economic Affairs. But first then, going to the supply chain, that was also mentioned in the title. Mark, I mean, what are the biggest bottlenecks in the supply chain getting to that goal first off in 2030?
Yeah, well, very simple. People and equipment. So who's looking for good engineers? And please. Already today, I think there are so many vacancies in this industry right now, and we have not even started. So I think we have a really big challenge with an outflow of very experienced people, an inflow of new people that need to come in, that need to be trained up, but also need to probably grasp all the technologies even faster than anybody had to do before. And the new generations also like to switch, by the way, from different tasks, and like to move around. So that's a big challenge. So I believe that the people challenge is probably the biggest challenge. And then you need equipment as well to build. And I think the most important thing here, because we're talking about the plan for the North Sea and the Netherlands, is to realize what is happening around us. Because the supply base that we represent also out of the IRO is an international supply base. And they're going to be extremely busy with what is happening around us as well. It's going very fast around us, around the Netherlands, with different countries here in Europe, the US, Asia Pacific. There's a lot happening. And if you're not fast enough with your licenses, and I do understand the ambition, and it's easy to say another 10 gigawatts here, but even Brazil is talking about 80 gigawatts. Colombia is talking about so many gigawatts, and all these other countries around it, and then Asia Pacific, Taiwan, Korea, Vietnam, Japan, Australia. I can say so many countries that are really actively pushing, also with floating wind and other things. So I think it's a challenge. Have the supply base, the equipment to really install, and the people to be able to do it. And I think we need to work together to map what is needed, and how do you get them early enough engaged that you make sure that you have the capacity, at least in the Netherlands and around in the North Sea.
So you really see a big challenge geopolitically speaking, on keeping them engaged, so your own suppliers. Is there something that the stakeholders on this podium today could collaborate on, making that easier for the suppliers to know, okay, you know, this goal is also one we want to focus on, something that is not happening yet? Or
Well, I think it's first and foremost extremely good that there's a very high ambition, that you have a target, that you want to go fast and you want to go big, which is really important, and also far out. So I think these plans for 2050 and the initiative that I think the Dutch government also took in Europe, in the European Union, to push for early announcements of what is required in so many years from now is really important to actually be able to plan, and for companies to invest in this industry and this equipment base, people that is required. So I think that needs to be an ongoing discussion, to be able to have a good map for all these companies, the supply base, to know how much is required in the upcoming years. And even my colleague here on the right side will talk about ports, which is also very important to understand what is really required in so many years from now, to be able to invest and to be prepared for it. And I think that is something that we need to get the discussion going and have an open discussion around it and understand what is happening around us as well.
yeah, because there's a lot happening around us in the world, not only regarding, of course, offshore, but that all plays along in this. Yeah, because I also wanted to, as a nice bridge, go to you, Eric, because of course the first bottleneck that Mark also mentioned, people. We already discussed you, of course, in the ports. You have that same problem. How are you going to manage all that? Also, as we discussed, rules and regulations can be different in different countries, so in different ports. How can you and the supply chain industry, or at least the ports, better work together so that the capacity can be grown to what is needed, maybe?
Yeah, well, adding to the question and what is already said, as ports we were always part of the supply chain, but in the major projects and the new announcements we were always the last to know. But you know, the investments in ports to adapt to that take the longest time. So now that's changing a bit, luckily, but it's not only a national issue, it's also a European issue. That's why we started, not we started, but Esbjerg was the initiative in starting a collaboration with ports around the North Sea, so including the UK, because otherwise you get that discussion, in order to address the port issue. And that's also a national item, so that's also addressed and recently also taken over by NVEA to address that. But what we see that there are more projects coming up and bigger and larger, and well, everything is on the upside, and we are losing ports because the draft is an issue, because they need more draft, they need more capacity both on land and both on the quay side. So if you are a terminal and you have 20 hectares, you think you have a splendid offshore wind farm. But for the future wind, if you're an installation port, as we are, you need more capacity. So you need to team up. And then you can team up with international ports. That's the issue of the port collaboration. Not on a commercial base, but on a nautical base, on a technical base, and on an infrastructure base. And as all the rest of the supply chain are visiting all these ports, they have a project in Eemshaven, then they go to Cuxhaven, then they go to Esbjerg, then they go to Hull, for instance. So it's an international issue. And then, but then I'm speaking too long, but then it's also within Europe that the regulations on boarding, for instance, on a vessel, you need different certificates in Holland than in other countries. And well, this can be done easier.
Yeah, as you also mentioned, and you also mentioned that this issue, well, you're taking that up with the Esbjerg new community you set up, but it's also something for NVEA, as you just mentioned, Jan, who's also taken this up. How can you, as NVEA, play a role in this and help make sure that the ports are able to, provide for the big gigawatt ask we have for the net?
Well, we're working with Eric and the other ports and the Dutch government. So we're basically an intermediary. So we're drafting a letter right now. Actually, I think you already signed it to send to the Dutch cabinet. And
so it's good that you're sitting in between.
We're definitely working. We're working all the time on these kind of issues. But I think for my association, the Netherlands Wind Energy Association, it's good to realize that our roots go back 50 years. To basically the Rome report, like the first time when humanity realized there's like limits to the growth of what we're doing here. And the whole drive of offshore energy, of course, is motivated by decarbonizing our societies. So if we do this, we need to do it responsibly. So we can talk about the way we organize our labor force. We can talk about materials that we need for our turbines. We can talk about our marinas and the way we modernize them. But in the end, we need to think about how we do this in such a way that the next generation, the generation that will be there behind you, will say, oh, this was a nice job. They've not only decarbonized the whole economy, or at least the energy system, but they also worked hard to do it in a responsible way for the ecological system, because the ecological crisis, the energy crisis and the climate crisis, they are now converging. So we need to organize our supply chain responsibly. Now, I was in Burundi 3 weeks ago. Burundi, Central Africa, it's a very small country. And there's praseodymium in Burundi. And there are some Chinese as well. And they're donating large infrastructure projects, also energy projects, different types, no turbines, but other stuff. And they take the praseodymium and they ship it to China. And they make magnets. And then I see David over there from Siemens. I think you buy those magnets. And they're ready-made. And they're really good. They don't corrode very rapidly because of this earth material, but also other materials. And then we use them in our offshore turbines. And then there were also some Russians. They also had some mines there. So I went to the Dutch embassy and I said, Mr. Ambassador, what's happening here? What are you doing? He said, I'm in agriculture, agri-tech, and we help the poor people, which is good. They're very poor in Burundi. It's one of the poorest countries in the world. But he didn't know anything about energy and he didn't know anything about climate. And there's no, for this, I cannot say that he's doing a bad job. This was just, his job was to do this. Now, for our government, I think we need to realize that if we want those turbines to spin in a responsible way, we need those earth materials. So we need to organize the way we are present in those countries where those earth materials are. They can also be found in Portugal. There's different issues there. But if you look at supply chain, I think we really need to anticipate 10, 15 years. My association, I was in Brussels last week. My association is also working hard on a European level, of course with Timmermans and Samsung, most Dutch people, they know, to really make sure that we get those rare earth materials, but also to make sure that the ecological crisis will not worsen because of all the things that we're organizing in our supply chain. So this is like
so in that role, you're able to look at the sustainable way, look at the problems of the supply chain, but also talk with the government, like how are we going to do this, in order to make sure that all those future generations can still exist in a sustainable way.
And also to organize it so that we make sure that those turbines, the turbine blades, are being constructed in such a way that we can recycle them and use them again, and that we set a standard that will be used in other countries as well. Because don't forget the next tender, and I really, I think you're doing a great job with your team and Ruud as well, because the next tender is all about ecology. And if we don't, somebody said today, it's not about not doing any harm. It's about how do we improve the ecological system by what we're doing. And if we're realizing doing that, all the young people will flock to your company and to the companies of IRO because they'll love working with you.
I can vouch for that. My generation would love that.
We'll make money and we'll improve the ecological system. We'll decarbonize our societies. That's what it's all about in the next 30 years.
And I see you, I hear a lot of positive things and all the possibilities you see. Do you see the goal of 20.5 gigawatts happening by 2030 in that case?
I think that will probably be more like, I know Bloomberg is very accurate in estimating stuff, so especially with numbers. So they'll probably be right about 2035 or something around 2035. But there's two questions if you look into the future. One is, how fast are we accelerating? Because that call for acceleration will always be there, and it will become stronger over the next few years. And how large can we go? So TNO, the Dutch Research Institute, yesterday published a study, or the day before yesterday, we can do 99 gigawatt offshore in the North Sea. So these numbers will go up all the time. And the question is, how far will they go up and how fast will we realize them. Now, we don't need to go as fast as we can, because if you look 10 years back in time, there's been a lot of innovation. The turbines have become like 3 times as big and also way more efficient. And now we're making them renewable. You know, we're closing the circle. So we shouldn't, you know, like just go and do everything at once, because we're learning. We're still, the curve, my organization is 50 years old and it's been going like this, and now it's exponential. So we really need to scale up, but don't go too fast, because we'll be learning along the way.
The hockey stick is happening.
Yep,
It's
definitely.
coming in, I know.
Definitely, yeah.
Then as a question to you, Marielle, of course, you hear the concerns. And I also think, I mean, reading about this, I believe one of the holy grails, which was also a question from the audience, is the standardization. Looking at, for example, phones, that we all have the same USB charger that we can charge our phones with. We're looking at different countries all around the North Sea. Are you able, or is the government able to speed those things up so that we have a quicker standardization with which you can have the people in the ports, have a more structured supply chain so that we can hopefully take those steps quicker?
It's. I want to thank you for your words about ecology. Yeah, so that these transitions have to go together, and that's the way forward. And that's one thing I wanted to say. But then I come to your other point. Standardization. Yeah, we set the goals high, and we need to get the production in an upper speed. At the same time, I think that we are still innovating the process, and we are getting more efficient wind turbines, and that's also needed because of the limited space we have on the North Sea. So I kind of tend to ask myself, why is this question addressed to the government? So what's the answer of the market? Because normally we set the goals, ambition, together with markets. And we tend to ask, is this a responsible target? Can you make it in this way? How can our tenders be in a better way so that you can subscribe to it, so that we can really get the goal done, get it in an ecological, responsible way, to get it in the homeland. So we have the wind farms offshore, but it has to be fitted in the system. I guess someone in the audience also mentioned that if we don't do this responsible, we create a lot of other problems. So that's the things we think about, and I'm really interested in the answer of the market itself about the standardization, and then what we can do to ensure that is another question.
Thank you. And I believe, just to make sure that Ruud doesn't kick me off the podium in a bit, I would love to just hear one last 1 or 2 sentences as a statement of regarding this, especially 2030 goal, how you feel the next concrete steps you think we can make to make that happen.
There are a lot of things happening. For instance, we are within Eemshaven looking in a decommissioning project for wind turbine blades. At the same time that the first 100% recyclable blades were installed at the Kaskasi wind farm, which the foundations came from Eemshaven and the blades from Esbjerg, I believe. So that's a thing what's happening in the ecological way. We are looking for, let's say, algaes, cockles, mussels, robotics and drones in order to have less movements of people and CTVs, and now going to more helicopters because of the downtime of the large turbines are more critical, so there are more helicopters than CTVs. I must admit that. So that's also a signal. But one of the other things I think important is people. We had last Friday in Eemshaven the minor offshore wind of the Hanze Hogeschool, and there are 32 students there, and they were all coming there for content. But so we teamed up with RWE and TKF and TenneT. But they are looking for interesting jobs in the future, and I think that there are different jobs, and we should address that national and also on a European level.
As Mark also mentioned,
so
take
yeah,
the next
so I think,
generation along. Yeah, no,
that
that's
are
really
one of the some of the takeaways.
What do you have anything to add to that, Mark?
Well, I have many things to add, but there's only limited time. But I think we just have to realize, and I want to make that point once again, I'm super excited and enthusiastic about the goals that we have and the ecology that we want to take on board and the ambition to actually go to clean energy and all these kind of things. But it's not a switch that we can switch over. And we have an existing industry that asks for a lot of people that keep that alive while we actually make that transition. That's a totally new industry and it needs double the amount of people and we don't have them at the moment. So that's a problem and we need to talk about that, how we're going to solve that with education and all these kind of things. And we need to work together. It's an enormous challenge. And then we have a supply base, if I talk for the whole supply base, that did not make too much money over the last 7 years because they came out of the longest and the deepest energy crisis that we have seen in the whole world for the last 50, 70 years. So that supply base will be very careful in making investments as well. So they need certainty, they need to know what the outlook is. So we need to help them and even the operators that did not necessarily make a lot of money. So I speak to a lot of investors and they say, oh, you're in wind, okay, do you make any money? That's the first question. So we have to realize that this needs to be in balance.
Yep.
And it goes very fast and we need to find that confidence that actually the whole supply base can invest in the long term and then work together to really deliver on that ultimate, very ambitious super goal that I think we have and that we should continue with.
I feel the willingness from everyone on making that happen on this stage. And I also, of course, read about the numbers and there's such a big question. So I hope that we can all bring them back to black numbers in the end. And I believe Jan, of course, as the mediator, his self-proclaimed mediator, is able to make sure that those connections between the government, the supply chain and the ports will go smoothly. Quickly, 1-2 last sentences before we go back to Ruud.
Well, I think one of the main issues to realize, in addition to everything that's been said, is that in 2040 or 2050, we'll have 70 gigawatt in the Netherlands, which will supply about 50% of our total energy need. So 50% is still not, you know, we still don't know how to get it renewable. And these are, you know, like TNO numbers and also verified by my own staff. So of course we can go up and down a little bit, but that's about it. Now, if you look at that, it means that there's a finite amount of space on the North Sea. So we have to be aware of the fact that it's not limitless. And we need to be very careful to see what we do with all that electricity that we generate and bring it onshore in the most efficient way possible. In order to do that, we'll really have to fortify our networks. So this is something that's been said before by someone else, but that's really a bottleneck in our supply chain, not on the, you know, like they say upstream and downstream in traditional like oil and gas, but I think on that side, we really need to look at what we're doing. Because otherwise, in 2040, we'll realize that we run out of space on the North Sea, and we don't know, you know, maybe a few nuclear plants, but that's still not going to cover it.
Let's do it all in a very durable way. Thank you all for the answers and your time, panelists. Would like to ask Ruud back on stage.
Thank you.
Want to stand beside me?
Yes.
We are dismissed.
You are dismissed. Yes. You may take another seat.
But I guess the people in the audience afterwards might want to ask you another bunch of questions.
Oh yeah, but we have network drinks afterwards, so there's room for that.
Time enough.
What is the main issue you got from this debate?
The main issue, I think, is that there's a lot of people working on this goal.
Yes.
And I feel the enormous willingness, at least from the stakeholders that you have on stage here, to work towards that goal. So it's not like you have, or at least what I've heard, of many conflicting issues there. It's just how are we able to work together efficiently to make this happen in such a small amount of time. That feels like the biggest bottleneck. But the fact that the willingness is so big, I think, is the biggest positive that I would take from this. And I hope that that enthusiasm, if I may call it that way, will stay and resonate with the rest of everyone listening.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you
may
too.
give Lotte also an applause. First, another thing that I noticed during this panel discussion is there were a lot of discussions about getting enough people working in this sector. I remember when we started to roll out, my colleagues from the ministry said, well, you have to calculate for us how many jobs are going to be generated by this, because otherwise the minister is losing his temper for offshore wind. And nowadays, oh my God, we need people. It is completely the other way around. So let's see what's happening outside. And we have asked Vattenfall and RWE to give a 1 minute introduction of what they are doing outside right now. Let's start with Hollandse Kust Zuid, the Vattenfall video.
I'm Ian Bremner. I'm the project director for Hollandse Kust Zuid. That's the largest subsidy-free wind farm under construction in the world. The project is made up of 140 turbines. That's split into two halves, Hollandse Kust 1 and 2, and Hollandse Kust 3 and 4, 70 in each, of course. That's going to produce a total of 1.5 gigawatts of renewable energy into the Dutch market. We are using cutting-edge techniques to contribute towards that Dutch ambition of 70 gigawatts by 2050. We've also got design features in our foundation and on the seabed that foster biodiversity and work in harmony with marine ecology. So what makes me proud in broad terms is, of course, the fact that we're delivering towards that energy transition. Personally, I'm so proud to be part of a wonderful team that are really delivering on this project successfully and ultimately delivering fossil-free living within one generation.
So that was an impression of what's happening in the Hollandse Kust Zuid wind farm. Just very shortly ago, we awarded RWE with a permit for the next wind farm, and we're going to look to their 1 minute impression right now. You may start the RWE video.
Good afternoon, I'm Michiel van Rij, and within RWE I'm the country lead for offshore wind development in the Benelux.
Good afternoon, my name is Rijn de Wolf, I'm a project director for Hollandse Kust West for RWE.
RWE is one of the world's leading renewable energy players. And we have our Growing Green strategy in which we target to develop 50 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030 and invest 50 billion euros to make this happen.
After a year of hard work with our team and partners, pushing the boundaries, we're really excited to have been granted the opportunity to develop and build Hollandse Kust West Site 7.
We were awarded the bid for system integration, and I want to thank everyone who participated in the preparations from the public side, but also our team, our partners, innovation partners, universities, everyone who made this bid successful, and also everyone who will make this dream come true in reality.
With our concept, we intend to provide a blueprint for the offshore wind farms of the future, perfectly matching supply and demand. We will build a wind farm of more than 760 megawatt, providing green power with the equivalent of 1 million homes. But to create that match, we will also develop and invest in green hydrogen solutions, e-boilers, and, for example, flexible charging. Most importantly is that we look ahead to benefit the wind farms to come. And for this, we will support some great innovators to bring their ideas to the demonstration phase.
Personally, I think all these innovations on system integration and ecology, they are key to accelerate offshore wind development in the Netherlands and also internationally.
We know that this is going to be a team effort, and we really look forward to do this together with our partners, but also the supply chain and stakeholders, and make this project a success together.
And at last, I just want to say, we're building our team. So if you are interested and keen to join us, please visit our new website, RWE Offshore Wind Development in the Benelux. Thank you.
Next time we just don't cut it after 1 minute. When you make an application for a permit in a tender, there is also a limit on the number of pages you're allowed to submit, and we just don't read the numbers which are over that limit. Okay, we go to the last part of this program, and that is all about the IJmuiden-Ver tender, at least the size 1, 2, 3 and 4 gigawatts together. And I start with Bram Dussard. Bram works at Rijkswaterstaat. And I always say, why is there no English name for Rijkswaterstaat? Because it's even, you can't even pronounce it in English.
No, you just have to try with you all. Rijkswaterstaat. Good for you, Joost.
We have 4 speakers in this part, and at the end you may raise your questions, but I can think about some questions already. We had a previous workshop in June.
Yep.
And
in
then
Haarlem.
you showed a planning for the wind farm site decision of IJmuiden-Ver.
Yeah.
How far are we?
In June, I indicated that the concept site decisions for IJmuiden-Ver would be published in the end of this year and the beginning of next year. And I'm pleased to say we're still on track, but we need a little bit more time for the environmental assessment, so it will be the later. The beginning of next year, then we'll publish the site decisions for IJmuiden-Ver, and we need a little bit more time for the environmental assessment as we expected earlier.
And
So,
let me guess,
on track.
that environmental impact assessment, the difficult part is the ecology?
Yes.
Maybe those
birds
species who are flying around?
Yeah, birds. One of the challenging topics within the environmental assessment is low-flying seabirds. We just come across some new scientific evidence and also data which suggests nuances in the way we calculated their behavior at nesting grounds and at feeding grounds earlier. And with the new insight we got now, we have a different and more insight perspective. So we're now in talks with the Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality to look into the data and to see if the data fits within the ecological framework of the North Sea and the ecological capacity of the North Sea.
Yeah, these are.
So I'll come to that shortly. I hope this month or else next month.
Yeah. And that's about low-flying birds.
Yep.
And also in June you have talked about. I always have to speak.
Yeah.
The minimum lowest tip level regulation. Whoa.
Yeah. Minimum lowest tip level. It's the way we prescribe it in the site decisions. I personally believe lowest blade clearance above main sea level is a bit easier to pronounce. Yes, on behalf of the Ministry of Economic Affairs, Rijkswaterstaat works on a procedure in which the turbines are shut off if there is high bird migration at rotor level. So it's not about sea birds, but on migratory birds. And if there is a lot of migration at rotor level, we want the turbines to be shut off to minimize the impact on the ecology of the offshore wind farms. We will be implementing this procedure in 3 phases. The first phase is already started, a desktop testing of the whole procedure. We've done that last month. With all stakeholders involved, offshore, within the government, and also wind farm owners. The second phase will start in January, when we start a practice run, a practice phase, in which all systems are operational, and we entail 2 curtailments, no less and no more. So we'll start with 2 curtailments, no less, no more, to see if all systems work as we expected, not only in our part of the procedure, but also for the wind farm owners and their part in the procedure. At the end, we'll do an evaluation that will be in May or June of next year, and after that, we'll make a decision to fully implement the scheme, and this will also entail law enforcement, and that's expected from July onwards.
Okay, and for which if that start-stop system is going to be introduced, for which wind farms will that be?
For the wind farms which are based on a site decision, so we call that in expert terms the 3rd generation of wind farms. The wind farms which have a water permit, which were built earlier than the 3rd generation wind farms, they will be asked to also participate in this procedure. But
that means it also applies to the wind farms which are already being built or under construction in this current roadmap.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, and that's
from Borselen onwards.
And that's not only for birds, but also for bats.
Yes, we've come across new monitoring data in which we see patterns of migrations of bats. And on the basis of that data, we are also looking into a curtailment for bats. Based on the data we now have, we expect that curtailment regulations will only be focused on high peaks of bat migration. And to keep it feasible also for the sector, we are looking in periods where there is low wind speeds and high bat migration.
Okay, we'll leave it to here, and if there are questions afterwards, we'll come back to you.
Okay.
And thank you, and of course, Emily de Wacht from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy. We saw at the beginning, the main part of this audience is developers, and they just want to know, how is the tender going to look like? So, tell us.
Fortunately, we wrote a very nice letter to Parliament a few weeks ago, and I hope you've all done your homework and read that very well and now come with extremely critical questions. So, no, thank you, Ruud, for the lovely introduction, and thank you as well for joining us today, and hopefully you're still keeping up with all the presentations. It's quite a lot of information to take in. But like I mentioned, we published a letter to Parliament to announce how we're going to permit like Ruud was saying before, the largest tender round that we've ever done in the Netherlands, which is very exciting. And today I'm just giving you a brief overview of our thinking to date. So I'm sure I'll be speaking to most of you in the upcoming months, and I've spoken to you over the 2 consultations round we had already. But yes, the Dutch government, see if this works. Yes. The Dutch government has doubled our ambitions. We're now planning to build approximately 21 gigawatts to be of installed capacity around 2030. And this is, like many of you have said in the panel as well, of course, an enormous task, which is only possible to complete if we work together efficiently, like Lotte was saying. And we have to do in a responsible manner, like Jan was saying. So this is what we're all trying to bring together in the tender permitting procedures, where actually everything comes together nicely in translating all our big ambitions into action. And I thought it was really nice to see those videos, to see what our hard work really results into. So thank you for that as well, to see what our desk job kind of leads to. So about Hollands Kust West, sorry. That was from last year. I've done this before. I made a fair. So we'll be doing as usually. The grid connections will be completed by TenneT. There'll be 2 grid connections, which Timon will speak to you more about later. One of them will land in Borselen in 2029, and the other one will land in the Maasvlakte in 2028. And over the past few months, our team has been researching the market conditions prior to making this decision. We have had 2 rounds of one-to-one conversations to really assess how we should proceed. We've consulted the offshore wind farm developers, NGOs, knowledge institutions, and other experts. We've looked at experiences from previous tenders, and we're also assessing the international developments, what are other countries doing in this respect, and trying to learn from that. And as thus, we came to the considered conclusion that we would like to permit these 4 gigawatts, again, using a comparative assessment and a financial bid. So yes, like with Hollandse Kust West, there are a few legal requirements to be taken into consideration. So these are the criteria that will be contained in this procedure. The first 3 are legal ones, so the security of realization and the contribution to the energy system and the financial bid are part and mandatory of this procedure choice. We'll look at what we've done with Hollandse Kust West and try to strengthen that after the results of both sites are known. And we've decided to include a financial bid given the great significant value of these sites and also to safeguard competition. And the financial bid, as you can see here, there's no amount included yet, and that is because this amount will be capped, and we know that it will be at a higher cap than was with Hollandse Kust West, so it will be higher than 50 million. However, we're still basing this on several sources of information. One of them will be the results of Hollandse Kust West, and as you know, it's not entirely known yet. And we're also looking to receive an independent appraisal and, of course, again, the developments in our surrounding neighbors. And the financial revenue will be used to partially pay for the integration in the North Sea to make sure that we can integrate this development of offshore energy with other activities in the North Sea. And I'm very aware of concerns in this regard. And we will not exceed what with the entire design of the financial bid, but also how it relates to the other criteria, what we think is possible within the business case based upon our market analysis. So this is, we're very carefully looking at that and also at wider policy developments which are closely connected to this. And in the upcoming months, after we've had these sources of information received, then we will also, of course, speak to all of you as well to see, to kind of check and balance our results. As to the other criteria, they'll be in the field of ecology, circularity, and international responsible business conduct, and possibly system integration. Because ecology is important, like I don't think I have to explain the importance here, everyone understands. The realization of 21 gigawatts is simply not possible if we don't make sure that it is compatible within the ecological capacity of the North Sea. We have to incentivize investments that benefit this capacity, and we will focus on the product installations and on location-specific challenges and future challenges. And we will try to encourage parties to come up with solution-oriented and innovative bids. We're thinking probably that we'll do at least 2 wind farm sites at this point, and they'll be most likely site 1 and 2. So those are the ones that are the closest to the Bruine Bank. And they are the ones that will be realized in 2029. This is not fully confirmed, so if anyone has very big thoughts on this, yes or no, do this, don't do this, please do get in touch. And then on circularity and international business conduct, this will be applicable to all 4 sites. These criteria will be more of a nature that are possible to meet for every party. So there'll be more check in the box, and we'll aim to encourage the wind industry to produce and operate in a responsible manner and to stimulate the sustainable supply of raw resources and natural resources, like we had earlier, is a very topical issue. And we also would like to encourage the sector to participate in the international multi-stakeholder ICRB agreement on renewable energy. And if you have any further questions about this criterion, my colleague Paulina is in the room. I don't know if you can raise your hand. Yes, she's there back in the corner, brown hair curls. And she's very happy to receive any advice you have on this, because we're amidst the process right now to kind of flesh things out. And then finally on system integration. This is, as you know, also an integral and really important part because, like many of you have said, and I think one of the questions earlier was asked, you have to absorb it in the energy system, otherwise what are you going to do with it? And it'll cost a lot of money. So we would like to, if we were to include this, we would stimulate investments and deals that are focused on better coordination between supply and demand, and really alleviate the congestion of the grid. So the reason why it's not fixed yet is that we're still exploring whether we can effectively really design this criterion in a way that is efficient, because we need to make sure that this would not happen if we didn't include it otherwise. We need to make sure that this is actually of added value to really enhance the grid transport capacity. And then finally, the weighing between these criteria will be that the most important one, the competitive element, shall be on the quality once more. And I understand maybe you came here with higher expectations and wanting more information here today. However, the tensions are running high. But I just wanted to give you the confidence and assure you that it is important for us as well to make sure you have sufficient information and enough time to really deal with this information and make as competitive and a quality-based bid as possible. So we will make sure that you have enough time to do so, and we will keep you updated as soon as we know more. And that's the thing. And then a bit more remarks about the wider tender design. So this was something that wasn't in the parliamentary letter, the top line, for anyone who wants to focus on this slide. We'll most likely combine the applications, which is completely different in Hollandse Kust West, where it was explicitly not allowed. This one will be then 2 times 2 gigawatts. We have decided to do this because we will believe this will further enable economies of scale. And this is in line with the direction the international market is moving as well. So if any big concerns about this, make sure to reach out. And in this tender, we've decided to cap the number of sites, not cap the number of sites that can be awarded per party and consortium. The reason for this is that we believe that there's at this point not a big risk of excessive market power to be limited, but we will of course keep a close eye on this because we would not want to be in that situation. And then we will cap the number of applications a party or consortium can submit per tender. And the reason for this is that we would like to limit the risks and regulatory burdens for both the public sector but also the private sector, because I'm very impressed with the huge work and amount of effort that has been put into Hollandse Kust West, and it can't have been easy. We were overwhelmed with the amount of applications. But I think it's in everyone's interest to do so. And then finally, this is not, just in regards to innovations, we understand it's a fairly navigate field to, how do you say, process to navigate in the sense of where do you go if you have questions about the innovations you want to submit. So Rijkswaterstaat is the competent authority for granting the Water Act permits, but RVO is the one that deals with all the tender-related issues. So if you have any questions, don't know where to start, RVO should be your first point of call. And then finally, just to quickly look ahead at further tender procedures, we believe that provided it is possible to set adequate qualitative conditions in other areas that promote social goals, we actually the auction procedure would be a very objective, predictable and rapid procedure that is suitable to permit and decide who can build this offshore wind farm. We've therefore started to prepare an amendment of the Offshore Wind Act, because this is the act where the 4 procedures are set out. And of course, every time we make a decision, we still have to assess and do market analysis and see which decision would be best. However, we would like to enhance the options we have at our disposal, and that requires a legal amendment. We intend to submit the amendments to this Offshore Wind Act to Parliament in good time before the next offshore wind round, which will be mid-2025. And of course, we'll make sure that there is enough time for every one of you to engage with our thinking along those lines. We have not set up a process for this, but we'll be doing so shortly. And then I think my final slide. What do the next few months look like? The timetable is, I believe, as you still have seen it in the letter as well, we've spent the past few months to prepare this, preparing our thinking along, making the decision on what procedure are we actually going to use and how would we like to shape it. We've done so on the conversations we've had so far. If you feel following this presentation that you would like to still hear any, or like to speak to us or share your ideas, please do so in writing this year, if possible at all. And if it's necessary to speak to us as well, we would like to do so in the early start of next year. And then of course it's up to us to publish the draft ministerial orders, and we'll be doing so at the latest at the earliest late March. So this will be late March, late of Q1. So if anyone has any holiday plans to take, you can do so before then. Just make sure you're there, because we'll require a quick turnaround and make sure that we're in time to actually publish the final ones at the latest in the third quarter. And then the tender will close at the end of the fourth quarter. And of course, we'll be assessing, like you're used with us, with RVO, and also with advice of an independent advisory committee, and announce the winners early the year after, 2024. That's it from me.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily, and thank you. You got a lot of attention when you said, and now I have a slide with information which is not in the parliamentary letter. That was, and then you mentioned it's going to be 2 times 2 gigawatt. And I thought, well, what's going to happen? Are the people happy? Is it a relief or a shock? But well, I couldn't get that impression yet, but I'm sure that discussion will start from now. Okay, Matthij Breider, RVO, and you are going to update us a bit on the site studies.
Yes, that's the timer?
Yeah, we run out of time, so we
are
in spare time. But I don't know if you follow the soccer games.
Yeah,
you know.
Let's do
today
so.
It's very normal to add an extra quarter. So
yeah, okay, that's good. Let me see. Yes. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Matthij Breider. I'm from RVO, the Netherlands Enterprise Agency. I want to talk you about the site investigations. Well, the most important one is, of course, the IJmuidenver 1 to 4 sites. As you heard from Emily, the permit tender will be in the Q4 of 2023. And because of the acceleration in the program, we were faced with a slight problem. So, because we start 3 years before the tender is opening with our site investigations, but suddenly the acceleration came, and that meant that the permit tender was also scheduled earlier to 2023. So, what we did was try to find out how could we accelerate also our site investigations. Well, this is the list what's coming up and what also have been done. But the most important thing is that we decided to publish an intermediate ground model with the geotechnical interpretation report in the Q1 of 2023. That means that not everything is included in the ground modeling yet. That will be done in Q3 of 2023. But at least at Q1, we will publish this information, and that's should be enough for the front-end engineering design, we believe. So that's hopefully in time for you to prepare for the tender in Q4. As I said, Q3, the final ground model will be published, including all the data, also including the lab tests. What we did for the mid-ocean assessment is that we already produced in 2019 a feasibility level mid-ocean assessment. That means that it's a rather rough design for the mid-ocean data. And we started also with a mid-ocean campaign in early 2022, but there is already data available for your yield assessments. There is already a data from the MetMast in IJmuiden that has run from 2012 to 2016. It's in the border of, I think it's site 2 and 4, roughly. There's also mid-ocean data available, which is perfectly suitable for doing your yield assessments. What we did is also now doing a mid-ocean campaign, but it's more information regarding gradients and also for the bathymetry features. This floating mid-ocean campaign started in Q1 to April. Okay, in April, so 2022, and it will run to 2024. And what we do for the mid-ocean assessment is that we produce in the Q3, we produce also a mid-ocean assessment based on 6 months of real mid-ocean campaign data. For site 5 and 6, we have more time, so that's good. Last summer we did a geophysical survey in this area. We tend to produce this in Q1 of 2023. And also we have just awarded Fugro with the biggest contract in geotechnical surveys for IJmuiden Ver 5-6, but also already for Nederwiek Zuid and also for Hollands Kust West Site 8. So it's the biggest contract ever in the world, we believe, for this amount of work. And we're very proud that we have Fugro on board for doing this for us. The results for the ground model will come in Q3. And also, as I said, we already started also in Nederwiek with the mid-ocean campaign already in spring this year. So also this data becomes available in 2023 and 2024. For Nederwiek Zuid, or Nederwiek Site 1, that's the southern part of Nederwiek, we also already started, and this will come, of course, a little bit later in this program. Also, we started with the floating mid-ocean campaign, floating LiDAR mid-ocean campaign in this year. And there is also already in this area data available because there is a platform, as I think it's in between the two areas. It's platform K13. There's also TNO is measuring there with a LiDAR on this platform. And this was also providing data if you need that already for your yield assessment. But we are currently running a campaign in the lowest border of the northern part for the mid-ocean campaign. And that data will come available also in 2023 and 2024. Next one. Yes. I think we already heard about innovations. In the site investigation, we also have innovations. And I think this one, and that's from the ten Noorden van de Waddeneilanden wind farm. So we believe that this is also a game changer, the 3D modeling, 3D ground modeling. And what we did for ten Noorden van de Wadde, and we published it this year, is that we included synthetic sympathies as well. And we went to the certifying body, a DNV in this case, and we said, okay, we have a 3D ground model, we have synthetic CPTs, can you also certify it? And they said, okay, certify synthetic CPTs, what should we do with it then? How could we do that? Well, we found a way, and finally they did. So we also received a certification for this 3D ground model, including the synthetic CPTs and with cutting edge label on it. Of course, we are curious what the market does with this ground model. So we intend to plan a market consultation in the first quarter of 2023 for the use of this 3D data. UHRS data? And also, is this synthetic CPT for design, is that useful for you or not? So next quarter, we will start with this market consultation. We are very curious to hear what you have to say about it and how you would use this. This is a picture of all the wind farm zones, but also the search areas. We have already started also with a Met-Ocean strategy, Met-Ocean campaign strategy. That's already on our website, so you can consult it and find it. And that's a plan for how should we, well, measure the whole area, including gradients, including bathymetry, but also wind speeds, etc. So we already started, as I said, with Met-Ocean campaigns in IJmuidenver and Nederwiek, but also we are planning next year for having Met-Ocean floating LiDAR Met-Ocean campaigns in the Noorderwind area. And we are now thinking, how could we extract that also to other areas? This market consultation is coming up. Also, we already started in this quarter, following up by the next quarter in 2023. And we are also curious about your ideas about how should we measure, what should we measure, where should we measure this data. And last but not least, we also intended to well, prepare a kind of program on what's coming up. So this is a slide. I will not go through everything, but what's coming up for the next quarters, so that also the stakeholders would know, okay, what tender is coming up when. I included some in the first quarter of 2023, second quarter, but it also includes, of course, a UXO desk study, also includes expert support, etc. But that's coming up for next year. And I want to conclude with that.
Thank you very much.
It says 0, Ruud.
Yeah,
so it's very good.
It doesn't go negative.
No, it's strange, but
no,
yeah.
We can go on for hours. No, we're going to our last presentation, and that will be given by Timon Govers. Timon, TenneT, our TSO, keeps on going with delivering, because I just read today or yesterday a message from Jan de Nul that they finished cable laying, export cable laying for Hollands Kust West Alpha and Hollands Kust Noord.
Indeed, yes.
So,
we're
almost connected.
We're almost connected, indeed. I think I can also present. Here. Oh, can someone turn my slides on, please? All right. So, indeed, we're making good progress on the Hollands Kust Noord and the Hollands Kust West grid connection systems. What I've included here in the slide is a new solid line, which represents the HKZ connection that has recently been completed. So that concludes us almost with the first roadmap, the 2023 roadmap. What we have ahead of us, and which represent the dotted lines, are is a program for 2030, indicated in the supplementary roadmap. Most of these connections are 2 gigawatt HVDC systems, further from the shore, and are slightly different from our current AC connections. I will tell a bit more about that later. But essentially, where we stand on these projects is that we're currently concluding the tender process for both the platforms as well as the onshore stations and the cable systems. We've asked for a standardized design, as we did for our AC systems, and we have consulted most of the design principles that are relevant from the developer perspective in 2019. What we're working very hard on currently is to embed those in the model agreements that concern your addressing the developers now, the realization agreement and the connection and transmission agreement. We intend to publish these model agreements in sync with the tender regulation that is to be expected by the end of the first quarter. So more details will follow on that. As Emily mentioned, we will be connecting sites 1 and 2 with our Amadivar Alpha system. Delivery is 1 year later than the Amadivar Beta connection, which will connect sites 3 and 4. As I was mentioning, you don't need to look at this slide into detail. I think the slides will be shared, so you can have a look at these. What is different from our AC connections is primarily the joint testing and commissioning period. So before we would have an energized system and we would be essentially done with our duties according to the development framework. What we now need to face is a joint procedure. We'll be testing the whole system and the delivery procedure is now indicated by 3 milestones. Out of which the first is under TenneT's responsibility, namely to deliver a platform for which the developer can connect their area cables to. Then it is the turn of the developer to be ready at a certain point in time to have connected all their inter-area cables and to have finished that connection. Because only then can we commence with the final testing, which will get us to the end of the process, namely a delivered system. So both the offshore wind farm as well as the grid connection system will only be ready by that stage. We'll be reflecting the principles for cooperation during this procedure in our realization agreement. What we also intend to do is to present to you how we aim to do this sometime in February, so that we're able also to get your reactions to that in order to get to a suitable process and contractual documentation. So if you are to remember one thing from this slide is that we need you to be ready at this milestone 2. And with that, I would like to conclude.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end, but let we first see if there are any questions for the last 4 speakers. Maybe the speakers can take the seats or anywhere here. And I have already a question here.
I don't actually have a question. I just wanted to mention something after what Simon said, is that we will update the so-called schadevergoedingsregeling according to what you have mentioned about simultaneous being up to speed. I hope everyone could hear me. Otherwise, can you repeat?
Yes. So you will update the compensation scheme according to the new plans of TenneT. Yes? So, okay. Somebody, I see somebody over there.
I don't know if it works. There's a question to Emily. You said that if system integration will be a criterion, it will be focused at alleviating congestion in the grid. Does that mean that it's going to be location-specific criteria?
That's a good question, because that's exactly the question we're asking ourselves, whether or not to do that.
Okay, so if that is the focus, then yes, it will be location-specific.
It's one of the options, so I'm sorry.
You only get political correct answers at this stage. The next question.
It's nonetheless worth asking questions like that, because if you have any
yeah,
that
well,
we need to provide clarity
we have
on
one in
it,
the
we'll
chat.
do that.
Sorry. Can you put on the handheld?
Hello? Yeah. We have a question from the chat. Oh. Is the ministry thinking about combined criteria, such like ecology and system integration?
That's also something we have considered, and to be honest, I don't think it's likely, because I believe the strength of not combining it will mean that the best quality is being achieved on that one criteria, because if you do combine them, you could win For instance, with a really good system integration idea, you could also win you don't have to do your best on ecology because your system integration is so good. And we really want to get the onderste kan, to say so. We really want to dig deep, I guess, and make sure that we achieve the best results on both.
Yeah, I see also some people from the RVO assessment team, and I don't think they would be very happy to make it very complicated.
No. We are combining it with circularity, though, and that's why it's different.
Okay, another question. Is still... Oh, you're the next one.
Yes, question to TenneT. Sorry. Is it decided the voltage level of the platform, if it will be 66 kV or something else?
Yeah, that is actually not our call. It's a call of the ministry. But for IMADIVER Alpha and Beta, so for sites 1 to 4, the voltage level will maintain 66 kV.
Okay, there was a question over here.
I have a question for Emily. You mentioned that you considered combined applications by 2 by 2 gigawatts. You also mentioned that site 1 and 2 are considered to be ecological measures. Would you consider the thought of a combined application of, for example, site 1 and 3 and site 2 and 4? Because that opens up another dimension where both ecology and system integration are combined, and would enable players who are possibly less well located near the Borstel area to also bid for system integration in a Maasvlakte landing.
So this, I think, I will let the experts advise me on as well, because if there is very strong arguments to be made for ecology, for instance, that specific flora or fauna are living in these two sites that need special attention, then that's something we need to be considering, which is why that has led me to say that it probably be 1 and 2. But if it shows that it needs to be 1 and 3, we'll definitely explore that option. But then I think I also have to check with TenneT how possible it is to make sure that the pull-in and the difficult schedule he made is feasible with 2 different developers.
Yeah, I appreciate the challenges.
Yes, but it's that we are asking ourselves that question as well, so it's good you raised it.
Okay, one last question. No last question, then I'm going to thank... Oh, there's still, sorry.
Yes, sorry. We have a last question in the chat.
Okay.
How are power consumers involved in the decision-making tender criteria?
So I believe it was in our letter to Parliament announcing the additions to the existing roadmap, in which we said something about citizen participation, and that was a result after consulting. Is that what is meant? Yeah, okay. So we spoke to them, and we understand there's a lot of interest, and for instance, Belgium is taking some steps in this as well. However, at the moment, we deem the challenges to be significant with system integration and ecology, and unfortunately, we're unable to focus on too many things without kind of not achieving the best results. So at this point in time, we would not focus on that. However, who knows what the future will bring.
Okay, that was the last question. So now I'm going to thank you again for your presentations, and I thank all the speakers in this workshop, and also Lotte for her moderating, and last but not least, the most important people, our attendees. I'm going to invite you now for network drinks and bites, and that can be found in the Netherlands Pavilion, and it's not the booth number on the slide. The correct booth number is 1327, but you will find it anyway. Thank you very much.
Well done.